everyone for joining what is our fourth meeting of the Division 83 Rulemaking Advisory Committee. I'm Sylvia Chabrowski. I'll be helping to facilitate today's meeting. Appreciate you all being here. If you'll remember, I'll just do like a little recap of our last couple of meetings and then go through our agenda and then we can dive in. So at RAC meeting number 3 and number 2 that we had previously in March and April, you spent those 2 meetings kind of really digging into Division 83 rules on undersea infrastructure easements in Oregon's territorial sea and providing your comments, your suggestions. And the team has taken all those comments and suggestions and is mulling them over. And we'll talk a bit about what that looks like today. And so you have had an opportunity to really kind of provide initial comments on all of the rule sections. And today will be an opportunity to kind of go deeper into some of those comments and see if you have anything else. So maybe if you want to dive into the next slide, I can go into kind of okay, sure. Let's do introductions first. So let's do department staff, Danielle, Natalia, Dario, and then Dana. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Danielle Boudreau, DSL's rulemaking coordinator.
Good morning, Natalia Stranatka, Territorial Sea Specialist.
Good morning, Dario Frazone, Proprietary Coordinator at the Department of State Lands.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dana Hicks, Planning and Policy Manager for the Aquatic Resource Management Program.
Perfect, thanks. All right, and then let's do introductions from RAC members. Just say hello. I'll go first to Jason and then Andy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jason Bush with the Pacific Ocean Energy Trust, POET.
And Andy Lanier.
Hey, good morning. Andy Lanier, Marine Affairs Coordinator. I'm a technical advisor for the group today.
Thanks, Andy. Cameron and then Danelle.
Hi, Cameron Fisher, Environmental Science Associates. Thank you.
Hi, Danelle Romaine with the Oregon PUD Association, subbing for Eric Chambers with Central Lincoln PUD.
Thanks, and thanks for subbing today. Let's go to Elaine and then Jill.
Good morning, Elaine Aldrich with Davis Rich Maine.
Hi, I'm Jill Rolfe, Coos County Community Development Director.
Great. Joanne and then Kevin.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I may have accidentally muted.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning. I'm sorry I don't have my video on. I'm actually traveling today, but I'm Joanne Morris of Google.
Thanks, Joanne. Let's go to Laurel, another technical advisor.
Good morning, everybody. Laurel Hellman, Oregon Parks and Recreation Department.
Right. And then is LOC staff, is that Greg Miller?
Oh, yep, sorry. Thanks for reminding me. I'll change that. Greg Miller, I'm the alternate for Kevin Raniger.
Perfect. Thanks for being here. Sarah and then Scott Marion.
Hi, all. Sarah McComb. I'm with Amazon Web Services.
Good morning. Scott Marion with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife Marine Program.
And then Scott McMullen.
Hi, good morning. Scott McMullen, Oregon Fishermen's Cable Committee.
Perfect. Did I miss any RAC members or alternates or technical advisors? All right, perfect. Okay, then let's dive into the agenda for today. So today we have quite a bit that we want to get through. So we're going to start with just background information, and that background information is really mostly going to be DSL sharing its process and considerations for making changes to the rules based on RAC member comments. So you'll hear a little bit about where they are in that process, what it looks like. And then for our RAC discussion, we have a few key things we want to do. We want to revisit portions of the rules where RAC members had some significant comments, and we want either to ask clarifying questions about some of those comments or seek additional perspectives. So Natalia will go through what that list of key comments is. And then we also know that at the last meeting, there were some concerns about how to treat outfalls into the ocean and, higher rates on outfalls. So DSL has a proposal for how to treat outfalls. So we want to see kind of RAC level of support for that proposal and see if you have additional comments. And then we just want to see if you have any other comments on any other portions of the rules, particularly anything that you have not yet brought up, right? So at RAC meeting number 2 and 3, we got plenty of comments. You're welcome to reiterate some of those, but also want to make sure that there's no stone left unturned that you wanted to share. And then lastly, DSL sent out documents related to the fiscal impact statement and the racial equity statement, which are two pieces that are required for any rulemaking process, which Danielle will get into a little bit later when presenting that, but we want to seek your input on that piece. And then we also have an opportunity for interested party comments towards the end of today's meeting. And I should say, we have a lot that we want to go through today, so we don't want to rush the conversation, but as you know, we're holding June 5th RAC meeting as an additional meeting if needed. So towards the end of today, we'll sort of work with you to determine, do we think another meeting is needed or is today sufficient? And it'll probably just depend on kind of where we get through in all of the topics. Anything else, Danielle or DSL you wanted to say about kind of the agenda or potential meeting number 5?
I forgot to update the meeting goals at the bottom of this slide, so I apologize.
Oh, that's okay.
Last month's. That's all I have to say about the agenda.
All right, well, that's it for the agenda. And just a reminder of our Zoom protocols. We have a lot of people in the room, so if you want to make a comment, just please raise your hand using the reactions button at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, just press *9. And I'll try to make sure that we're hearing from everyone, seek a balance of speaking time during discussion. Use the chat if you need any technical support, and remember to keep your mic muted unless you're speaking, and we always appreciate use of video, and as always, be respectful of each other. All right, with that, I think we can dive into the overview. So again, I'll hand it over to Natalia, and she's going to go through kind of how DSL is handling review of RAC comments, where they are in the process for that, and some of the kind of key comments we've been hearing. So Natalia, over to you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Good morning, everyone, one more time. I want to let you know that all comments, and thank you so much for all comments that we received during the RAC meetings, but also by email. All of you have of them. We try to judge in what to consider. Some of them easy to consider, some of them require consultation with our sister agency, and some of them we want to have clarification and see the discussion between the RAC member, because some comments from the RAC member, they contradict with each other. So we try to find the balance and immediate support in that. So that's why I will not talk too much. It's just 3 slides, but this is bullet point that you can see. I will tell a little bit what comments it's easy to consider and which comment under the consideration. And then we will talk about what require more input and outfall later on that Sylvia already mentioned. But yeah, I want to let you know that all comments we are hearing each of you, and we consider, and we are working very hard, try to find the balance between. Next slide, please. So here is the comments that easy to consider, and we say yes to that. First of all, as was required, we in our new rules, updated rules, we will have an easement for 25 years to reflect cable lifespan. Yes, that would be considered instead of 20 years easements, and then we will need to adjust. There were a bunch of comments if it's 25 years easements, then how the renewal should be proceeded, etc. So that will be aligned in each section rules. Then also we will consider, there were several comments about application and renewal process clarity, that some language contradict to each other. We also will put some criteria to reflect and clarify that information, what information needed. But also I want to remind that DSL got authority from the statute. This is umbrella law, which is followed by Oregon administrative rules, which what we have now, Division 83. Not everything can be reflected in the administrative rules, and that's why the third step is a policy and procedure. And as I mentioned in the early RACs meeting, sometimes rules contain requirements like what should be submitted for complete application, like there is a list, emergency response plan, operating agreements, the detail what should, for example, emergency response plan look like, and etc. That could be reflected in more clear criteria in our policy and procedure, which we call basically guidelines that assist internal operation of the agency and submission of application that I mentioned in early RACs. Yes, this is what we will consider. And the next slide, there is a lot of, next slide, please.
And maybe before we go there, Elaine, do you have a clarifying question? There's only a few slides to go through, so we don't want to get into deep discussion.
Yeah, no,
do you have
just
a
real
clarifying
quick
question?
Yeah, just real quick. I want to make sure I'm looking at the right things as we're walking through these slides. So we received a new March rules, draft rules with comments embedded in them, and then there's some red line limited to one of the rule sections. Are we anticipating seeing more red line to incorporate these comments that Natalia is talking about, or what's the sequencing for how this is going to work, given that we're talking about maybe this being the last substantive RAC meeting?
That's a good question. So as far as the red line, we do not have updated draft rules because it does take some time to talk over these things. But we will send out updated rules to y'all around the time of the public comment period. Or we can send a follow-up email with, decisions that were made prior and send that out prior to the public comment period. I just have to think through it. It all depends on timing of when we can get these things done. Because as a lot of you know, in state government, things don't always move fast. But I know Natalia is meeting with agencies next week to go over some of these things. So we're trying to get to those edits as soon as possible.
It seems like then that the one more meeting for the June meeting probably is needed. I would think you would want to shop those red lines to the RAC before you put them out for public comment.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That is a very good consideration. And when we have the discussion at the end, if you could bring that up again, that would be appreciated.
Great. Thanks, Elaine.
Thank you.
And also, and Natalia is going to go through some other pieces here, but I should also note that as we're kind of reiterating what Danielle was saying, there's a very strong chance that even in June, you won't see all of the red lines that would still be made before the rules go out for a public process, right? I just want to clarify that too. Is that right, Danielle? There still may be changes made before it goes out to public, for public review at the review.
Yeah. So I'll be filing the rules with the Secretary of State sometime in June. So we'll hopefully have the red line versions done. I think, Natalia, we talked about by June 18th. So that way I have time to file them the next week. And so there may be some things that occur after a June 5th meeting, but we're going to try to get what we can to you ahead of time.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's a good comment. Thank you so much. But again, as I mentioned, and you can see on my second slide, Those questions and comments we received that really require consultation with our sister agency, first of all, internal consultation with different programs and expert, proprietary coordinator. Also with our sister agency like DLCD, OPRD, and ODFW, and they are presented here as a technical advisor as well, representative of those agencies, but the also important piece is with Department of Justice. And that's require coordination and require time. So as my understanding, you will have opportunity also to comment during the public comments period. But it's an ongoing process, and we are hearing you, and we are adding based on what we got from all agency and coordination. So on this second slide, you can see, as I already mentioned, this is comments, and I'm not going to details. All of you, you have the list, 9 pages of all those comments. But this is the key component that we try to reach agreement and cooperate with other agency, and also decide internally, like information DSL require some criteria, any additional information. There was a comment. Flexibility in timeline. There was also both sides that DSL should give some timelines, but also asking us don't put some timelines for industry because they are not able to fulfill some of them during the 120 days. So such kind of things. Technical expert use that now Territorial Sea Plan Part 4 allow DSL to hire technical expert if it's needed. And there was a request to make a list of technical expert that would be easy for DSL and company to choose, and also to proceed and prepare a report for DSL. Burial inspection report, again, there was number of days and what should it include. Separation distance, we will be talking a little bit today. Holding public meeting before application. This is a contradiction between several RAC members. So we need to find the solution to that. Compensation for bore pipes and outfalls, and we will be talking about this today as well, and bore pipes decommissioning. This is a hot topic that require coordination and discussion. And the type of financial assurance, this is we receive comments from Sarah, and you have it in your RAC 4 materials that DSL should find some alternative for already proposed financial assurance. Next slide, please. And on this is my last slide that I want to have a little bit more discussion today to address key component and to find the appropriate solution and help us to make a decision. There was a comment about removal of 3-inch diameter for fiber optical cables. And I want to hear more about this. What exactly you propose, and why should we remove? Because 3 inches, when we put this 3 inches and more than 3 inches in diameter in compensation formula, it was intended that fiber optical cables usually not exist in 3 inches, so they are less than 3 inches. That's why we use $3 per linear foot. Everything more than 3 inches, it could be pipeline, it could be whatever different type of infrastructure that require using diameter. So I would like to hear more about this. If we remove 3 inches diameter requires, what do you propose? That's coming up to the next bubble about $3 and compensation formula. Again, here is a contradiction between different RAC members. We had minimum $3, and we heard that $3 is too high. different perspective. I want to have more discussion about this, if it's high compared to what, because we did analysis and we presented compared to other states why we choose $3 per lineal foot and the 3 inches limitation for diameter, and then compensation formula. So if it's too high, I would like to hear high compared to what, and what do you propose? And I would like to hear as much as possible different voices and perspective that can help us to determine the final compensation formula for that. Compensation for outfalls, Daria will be talking after me regarding the formula that DSL proposed. Again, we would like to hear your feedback about that and if there is something we should add and consider. The next one, separation distance. We put minimum 300 meters as suggestion from guidelines International Cable Protection Committee. Yes, usually it's 2-3 depths of water, but there is a guideline saying if this now A cannot be achieved, you go to B. If B cannot be achieved, you go to C, which is less separation distance. If that cannot be achieved, you go to bullet D. And last one, and DSL choose D. This is a minimum 300 meters for separation distance just to allow for repairing cables. Because as I mentioned before, we will need a cable assessment study for landing cables and all infrastructure in the territorial sea. So we choose 300 meters of separation distance, but there was a comment that yes, we should have and give a space and allow to be that separation distance less than 300 meters when it's the cable coming close to onshore and when they need to be bundled. We would like to hear what would be your proposal? How do you consider that? Because from the technical perspective, I mean, industry, you know better from which point they start to bundle. Of course, it depends. Each individual case is different, but some perspective that would be useful that we can consider to elaborate more in our rules. And the last one, type of financial assurance. This is related to the last comment from Sarah. What type of financial assurance? Because what we have now, that's already, I mean, it was there for previous 25 years. And this is in all other rules as well. But you propose something to find some alternative. I want to understand why do we need to find alternative and why do we need to look at different type of financial assurance in addition to what we have right now in our rules. I would like to hear more about that as well. So this is 5 key point topic that would be really useful for us to hear your perspective. Again, I want to hear as much as possible different voices. I don't want that just dominated by 2 or 3 people because it really will help us to find the solution. And next slide I will give to Dario. He will be talking about outfall compensation. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalia. Just as a little background here, we do have a division of rules, Division 123, which cover easements in non-trust lands. So submersible lands of the state. And currently, all of the easements for outfalls, even if they're in the territorial sea, are covered by Division 123 rules or would be covered by Division 123 rules. One of the goals for this rulemaking is to move all easements or uses in the territorial sea from Division 123 into Division 83 as the rulemaking expands the division from just fiber optic cable focus to, you know, all undersea infrastructure. So we're proposing to use the Division 123 compensation calculation methodology for single and multi-use outfall easements under Division 83 in response to some concerns that we had about the cost of outfalls under the current proposed rules. Next slide, please. So the current compensation methodology for outfalls under Division 123 is basically the LA, or the area of use in square feet, multiplied by an adjacent land value, an average per square foot, multiplied by a fixed rate of 33%, or the area of use, or the LA, multiplied by the statewide maximum value per square foot. So if land's value exceeds a certain amount, it's capped at this maximum value, or a $500 minimum as a flat minimum. So next slide, please. So I've worked out a couple examples of compensation for Division 123 outfalls under the existing rules, looking at these specific uses and their adjacent land values. And one of the important notes is that it kind of varies wildly based on where the use is located. So as you can see, for the first example, it's a little bit smaller. It's only 32,500 square feet, but the adjacent land value is very low. So it's, 2 cents per square foot. And that doesn't even meet the threshold of the $500 minimum limit. So that easement compensation would be $500. But then you can get to other places. I think that easement's located in a remote part of Douglas County. So then you could get to other locations. I think the next one's in Lincoln County. This easement is a bit larger too. It's 200,000, almost 300,000, or 203,000 square feet. But it is capped out at the $15.10 statewide maximum value per square foot for the adjacent land value. And also that statewide maximum goes up 3% each year. So it increases year over year. And I think I looked at this as if it was 2027. So that easement, for example, for that outfall would be, over $1 million, slightly over $1 million. And then there's another example where this is a very large easement of 3,500,000 square feet, but also has a pretty low in comparison value per square foot of 8 cents per square foot. So that easement's only $95,000. And you can see in the next two examples, these two examples are almost side by side to each other. I think they're in Lincoln or Tillamook County. I can't remember, but they're right next to each other. And, their adjacent land value is, in one example, 11, almost 12 cents, or almost $12 per square foot. And one is only $3 per square foot. So just kind of this methodology varies largely based on the location and, the size of the use and the value of the adjacent riparian upland. And I think that's it for my slides.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dario. So what we want to do for a discussion today, kind of just to stay a little organized, we first want to hear if you have, if this proposal that Dario suggested sounds okay for outfalls. So we'll focus on outfalls, and then we'll go back to all of the topics that Natalia presented in the bubbles above to kind of ask some clarifying questions, get different perspectives. and then we'll open it up for just any other comments. So before we dive in, does that sound okay? Any concerns, clarifying questions?
Do you all want me to keep this up while we discuss outfalls, or do you want me to stop sharing so that we can just see each other as a group?
I think you can stop sharing and put it back
Okay.
up if we need to.
All right, thank you.
So yeah, so let's talk about outfalls first. Again, at the last meeting, there was concern that the price would just be too high for outfalls under the new compensation formula. So the proposal is to just keep the current compensation formula for outfalls and essentially copy and paste it into Division 83. Those are my words, not DSL's, but I'm sure it's much more difficult than just copy and pasting, but essentially using the same formula and moving it in the rules. So how does that proposal sound to folks? Any concerns with that or anything else that DSL should be considering for outfall compensation? Or, for easements for outfalls? Any thoughts? Yeah, Scott, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm just wondering, that sounds fine to me, but I'm wondering about potential other future types of infrastructure, as we contemplate Division 83 covering essentially all infrastructure that might be implemented if a separate structure for outfalls would set the precedent or imply that other types of future infrastructure would also have another set of rules specifically pertaining to them, just anticipating how that might play out.
Yeah, maybe DSL, any thoughts on that? Like this setting a precedent for treating other types of infrastructure differently?
So thanks for the comment, Scott. Well, other type of infrastructure that's covered by that compensation formula. We have square foot and we have per linear diameter for cables, per linear foot and diameter for cables and pipelines. We try to address outfall because several easements were issued before in 1970 and later on under Division 123, and at some point they will be renewed. That's why we do need some rulemaking in the future how to address so many other issues in the renewable energy facility. But for now, yes, we decided to have that compensation formula for all other type of infrastructure as we propose, and outfalls we have from Division 123. Yeah, and I hope I answered your question. Or you can clarify what do you mean by other type of infrastructure?
Well, just thinking about potential future uses, we
Yeah.
talked about, water pipelines or other kinds
Yeah.
of future needs that we're not considering now. It makes sense to.
Yeah, that would be covered by new compensation formula.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because we, as Dario mentioned, it's kind of different utility for now. They split in different divisions. And what we try to do, kind of one division that would address all undersea infrastructure in the territorial sea. And for now, we are amending just one division, but there is other Division 123, Division 140 for renewable energy facility. And whatever we can do right now, we try to be consistent and to align, thinking about, okay, easements that were issued before under different division, how should we deal with them when time will come to renew them? So that's why new infrastructure covering by new compensation formula and easements requirements based on the Senate Bill 793 requirements, amendment of the Territorial Sea Plan Part 4, and also updated in our other rules. And for now, we try to cover outfalls that were easements were issued before this amendment, what we are doing right now. We found this solution, but again, we are open. What do you propose? What do you think about this? And how should we deal in the future?
Thanks, Natalia. Scott McMullen.
Yeah, thank you. I still have some concerns with this formula, just because using the upland land value, we can see how inconsistent that is. I think there's cases where the upland, I mean, I don't understand why the upland land value should really make any difference. We have a underground use. And if that underground use happens to be on the prominent seaside, you're going to pay a tremendous amount, the maximum. If it happens down at Twin Rocks in a very underdeveloped area, quite a bit less. But the impacts, which are really negligible, are exactly the same. You have a bore underneath the ground, and I feel like that this is just an attempt to raise funds. I understand that the department has to provide funding with state resources, but the flip side of all this is that if you have rates that discourage development, then we may net less as a state because development goes elsewhere. So I have to express that I'm a little concerned about a formula that would just be solely based on the upland value when there's really, it has nothing to do with the upland value. It's all underground. It doesn't impact any differently if it's at the seaside prom going to an aquarium, or if it's a sewer outfall in a rural neighborhood in off the beaten path somewhere. So just my thoughts. Sorry.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
I
And
have
just
a
to
quick-
clarify, would your preference be to use the current Division 83 compensation rate or a compensation formula, the $3 per foot, the one we've been looking at, instead of what currently exists, or it's just something completely new?
I think something completely different, maybe something that's more a fixed rate that would be applicable. I don't see how an ocean outfall really has much of an impact, and it actually has, because there's an outfall structure in the ocean for sewer outfalls. They probably have a slightly larger impact. There's a potential of something getting snagged on it out in the ocean, but compared to, say, a subsea cable pipe conduit, but there just really isn't any impact here, and it seems like the state might be well suited, looking at the future and all the potential that could come in the future. It seems like we should just put a fixed rate, say here's the fee, have it reasonable, and call it good.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Others? And maybe I'll ask if folks are comfortable with the, using the current fee, like a thumbs up or something, or not current fee, the current Division 123 compensation formula, like a thumbs up or something would be helpful. But yeah, I'll go to Jason and then Laurel.
Yeah, so I must admit I feel like I'm catching up here. At first I was confused why we're talking about outfalls in the context of 141. Then I heard someone say that the attempt is to actually broaden 141 to include a variety of infrastructure. Is that correct? Did I hear you correctly?
No.
No. Why are we
So-
talking about outfalls in the section talking about cables coming to shore in Oregon?
So there's 141's like the overall chapter, like of rules, but the division, there's two divisions. There's Division 123, which focuses on easements for non-trust lands. And those have issued or would include currently uses in the territorial sea, right? Like an outfall in the territorial sea. So part of the purpose of this rulemaking for Division 83 is, which had previously focused just on fiber optic cables in the territorial sea, to expand this division of rules to include all uses of the infrastructure in the territorial sea.
Okay, so now you're asking this RAC to comment on outfalls, and personally, these are, this is two different things. Was thing is Fred chalk and cheese. The focus of this group on cable crossings is, for me, very, very different than outfalls.
Well, and Jason, just to clarify for a second, at the last meeting, there was a comment brought up by a RAC member that said, would this fee that's on cables, would that also apply to outfalls? And the answer is yes, it would, unless we make a change. And there was a comment that they didn't want, that there was concern about the fee being really high on outfalls that are owned by coastal communities, and the coastal communities would have to pay for it. So that's why it's being discussed.
I remember that. That was I believe Scott brought up that example. I remember that. Okay, fair enough. But my opinion on this, however, is that I'm not here to comment on outfalls personally. I'm not, how should I say it? I'm not a fan of outfalls, so I don't want to comment on the pricing of the cost of the easements for those. So personally, I don't want to comment on this. I'm not here to comment on outfall issues for small communities in Oregon. I'm not prepared to say anything about that.
That's fair. Thanks, Jason. Laurel?
I don't have a comment about the fee structure, just flagging that we're currently doing our ocean shore rulemaking, which includes an assessment of fees for our ocean shore permitting. And I know we have a meeting set up with DSL to talk about coordination on this, but so there would be an overlap of jurisdiction for permitting for ocean shore alterations for outfalls, for example. And just so that the group knows that, we're going to coordinate on that, but maybe we need to discuss it at a future meeting because we haven't had that agency to agency coordination yet.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and Elaine, I appreciate your comment in the chat that, this is a conversation for local jurisdictions as well. A lot of you might represent different interests that don't have much of an opinion or don't have that expertise in outfall. So that's fair. So maybe I'll see if Jill, if you have any thoughts on this, or Greg. And maybe also Danielle, just as a little bit more of the kind of local folks.
Yeah, sorry, it took me a second to get off mute.
Sure.
In talking about outfall, my only question, and this really comes from an uneducated standpoint as it relates to the rules. Some of our cities would have like a bay, Coos Bay, for example, and the outfall would fall into the bay per se. I know that's kind of part of the sea as it relates to definitions, but I didn't know if there's a complicating factor in defining where the outfall is as it related to city infrastructure.
Okay.
I think if something is not in the territorial sea, it wouldn't be included in Division 83 rules. So if it was in like Tillamook Bay, right, for example, then it would be covered under Division 123 rules.
Oh, so a bay would be defined differently than the ocean.
Yeah, the territorial sea is the Pacific Ocean 3 miles out. So
right.
Yeah, like a Tillamook Bay or Netarts Bay or something, or would not be considered part of the territorial sea from my understanding.
Okay, some definitions might conflict with that, so maybe if we get clarity on that, that could help.
Okay. And Greg, do you have any thoughts on that compensation formula for outfalls, like using what currently exists or anything else?
I don't. That's again, I apologize for not making the last meeting and being late to this one. We need to talk with some city infrastructure folks on that first.
Yeah. Okay. Jill?
I guess I'm trying to figure out what, he just asked about the outfalls that fall in the bay. So we have outfalls in our estuary that are in the bay in Coos Bay. And so how would you treat those through DSL?
Well, I know one of the examples that we had is for an easement for the International Port of Coos Bay.
Right.
Danielle, can we share the presentation slide again where I had the examples? Thank you. So that one is 46009. So just as an example, that's the very large use for an outfall. And 3,500,000 square feet, but the adjacent riparian upland is relatively low value. So the formula would say that when this easement would come up for renewal in 2071, it was issued in 2072, so for 99 years or 100 years, I think. So when it comes up for renewal in 2071, assuming that these rules were still in place at that time, this is what the compensation would be due at that time.
Okay, so this compensation would apply in that case,
Yeah,
even though
and
it's not in the ocean.
this is in the ocean, yes.
So I'm talking about like we have several outfalls that actually are in the bay, in the Coos Bay, in the estuary. So you don't have a formula that applies in the estuary too?
If it was in the bay, it would be under the Division 123 rules. But basically we're going to be taking the Division 123 compensation methodology into Division 83, so it would be the same.
Okay. That's all I don't really have any comments about the actual compensation, but I just needed to understand how they applied. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jill.
Yeah, just to clarify, because Division 123 for now covering all waterways, including territorial sea. And what we are doing in territorial sea, would be under Division 83, but Division 123, everything there still apply for other waterways. It could be lake, rivers, bays, and etc. All utilities and other waterways, they're still covered by Division 123.
So the same formula applies to outfalls going into the bay versus going into the territorial sea. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
because that's why we try to find the solution for those easements that were issued before, some for 50 years or 99 years, as Dario mentioned. They will need to be renewed, or some other new outfalls could be in the future. Yes, we try to find the solution. To consider them using the current methodology that we have in Division 123, because as we receive comments that the new formula that will apply for cables, pipelines, and other utilities, it's very high for outfalls. So that's why we brought this to show you example and to have some discussion about this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know we have a number of other topics. So, I think what I've heard so far is some folks are fine with just kind of using the same formula that exists for outfalls and moving it into Division 83. Some concerns, heard you, Scott McMullen, that the overall the using adjacent land value doesn't feel like the right approach. And some folks just, don't know, which is fair. So maybe DSL, is that enough for you to kind of work with and try to make a recommendation moving forward?
Yeah, I think for now, we don't want to focus just on outfalls because it's important to have other topics. But I would like to remind that, and Greg mentioned that you need to consult with local folks. You will still have opportunity to submit comments during the public comments period. For now, we try to have a new draft text that we can post on our website for public comments period, but you will still have 1 month to submit comments, and then we will consider those comments for the final draft. So please do this and distribute as much as possible for public comments period. Yeah, but for now, I do want to focus on other aspects.
Perfect. Thanks, Natalia. All right, so let's go to some of the other topics that were on the slide. I don't know that we necessarily need to put them up, but there's 4 key topics. So I'll just go to the first one, which was removing the sort of upcharge for fiber optic cables larger than 3 inches in diameter. Natalia was looking for kind of just some clarification on why there was that comment made, and if there's any kind of other points of view. And maybe Natalia, is there anything else you want to say on that in terms of framing?
No, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should put that slide, just remind folks of the bubbles. And
Do you want me
Danielle,
do you want me to put the rule language up or the slide?
let's do the slide, just visually remind, and then we can go for rules. Because I think all those comments, everyone has those. But just remind what topic we want to focus on, we want to get a feedback, because it was really helpful for our consultation with agency and then drafting updated text. Again, this is related to diameter separation of those 3 inches and more than 3 inches cables and pipelines, $3 per linear foot and compensation formula. So we talk about outfall, we don't need to focus for now. Separation distance, 300 meters, and type of financial assurance. So let's maybe start with 3 inches diameter, because that related to the same formula, how we calculate, and $3 in compensation rates. Yes, I would like to hear comments or any perspective voices for that one. Again, if you propose and saying there's something too high, I would like to hear what you propose, what the solution could be here that can help us to make a decision. After that, we go to separation distance, and then we go to financial assurance type.
Yeah.
So 3 main topics for now.
Great. Yeah. So just hear from folks, currently the formula is for cables and other utilities with a diameter of up to 3 inches. They use the compensation formula of, $3 per $3 times linear foot times the term. So if folks feel like that 3 inches piece is off, would love to hear why and what your proposal might be. And I believe, Sarah, it might have been you that made this comment at the last meeting.
I was gonna say it was me. I was waiting to see if anybody else wanted to talk. But I'm happy to go back to this. So this is a recommendation that we made. It's in the written comments that were submitted and attached to the last email. So our recommendation is it's not the removal of the 3-inch diameter for the entire length of the cable. It was the request to exempt the HDD from the calculation, because the HDD is bigger than 3 inches. The HDD, the horizontal directional drilling, the bore pipe that is used from the beach manhole, go under a sand dune, go out into the water. So we asked to have an exception basically for that portion of it to essentially maintain the 3-inch diameter for the entire length of the cable, because we utilize the HDD in order to lessen environmental impact. Essentially, I think Scott was one of the ones who mentioned last time, without an HDD, the way that we would bring a cable on shore is we dig in a gigantic trench into the beach and bury the cable. And that winds up not being sustainable over the long term. It damages the beach, it damages the dune, and it winds up with the moving of sediment and sand. The cable usually winds up being exposed anyway. So to protect the cable, to protect the environment around it, we utilize the HDD. So this is essentially a required piece of equipment that we do for the benefit of everybody involved. And so the uplift portion of the HDD itself, because an HDD is wider than 3 inches. It's on average usually 6 inches or so. That portion of it, especially depending on how long your HDD is, can come across as punitive when we are taking this step in order to benefit everybody involved. So that's why we were asking for the exemption for the HDD portion of it to not have that uplift. That was our request.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. Just follow up. So you're okay with having those 3 inches for fiber optical cables and diameter more for that, except
I'm okay with
bore
that.
pipe and $3 per linear foot. So I would like to hear more. How would you treat a bore pipe in this case?
I would basically treat it as if it was part of the cable infrastructure, and I would apply the 3 inches to that section of the bore pipe because that's where the cable is.
Okay.
Thanks, Garrett. And maybe I'll hear from others, kind of thoughts on that proposal, whether in agreement or whether you have a different point of view. Yeah, Scott McMullen.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think I explained in one of the earlier meetings that we had one of our early cables, the first or second one, did a beach trench where they didn't use an HDD bore, and that cable came to the surface. I should say the surface came to the cable. Actually, we had a lot of sand migration one particular summer, and it exposed the cable. And it was, I think those in the parks department understand it was an eyesore. I guess that would probably be the best way to explain it. It wasn't a hazard or anything. It just was visible on the beach and kind of an eyesore for beachcombers. So after that, every single installation has been with an HDD bore, and it's it's the correct way to do it, and we should exempt that from. I believe we should exempt it because it's a required piece of infrastructure. It can stay in, be reused in the future once the cable's required, which would be less environmental impact for anybody if you reuse an existing bore. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. And Joanne?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I also agree with Sarah's proposal.
Okay, thanks, Joanne.
And I have follow-up question because it's important. Okay, so I hear you accept bore pipeline, but also bore pipe. The proposal was to accept when you decommissioning to leave this in place.
Well, we can't remove it is the problem. Once they're in, they're in.
Yes, and there was like comments about encroachment. We had this situation as real example. If let's say we accept everything in bore pipe from encroachment as well, we had this situation with H cable when all the equipment basically left inside the bore pipeline. So you cannot reuse bore pipe. It's a kind of junk and waste inside the bore pipe. And I hear the proposal also to accept bore pipe from encroachment because you can be reused. So we need to find somehow of solution in this case if everything okay with the bore pipe and we don't have that situation as we had with the H cable, how that bore pipe should be reused. Is it any mechanism that cable company can, I don't know, agreement between different company that other company can use that bore pipe for their cable landing, or you somehow want to continue to use that? But I do want to consider all those different options.
Yeah,
and
so in
worst
part,
case scenarios.
in part, I would say, so if we base this entirely upon worst case scenarios, I think I agree that worst case scenarios have to be taken into account. However, to base everything off of a worst case scenario sets everything up for failure. It sets everything up for that worst case scenario. Because the reality is the likelihood of that happening is incredibly small. It was incredibly unfortunate that that did occur, but the likelihood of it happening again and happening with any regularity is incredibly small. The amount of study and care that we take to make sure that these things do succeed, because it is a waste of resources and a waste of infrastructure on our side to have something fail. I can't speak to that individual scenario. I was not involved. It's not Amazon's asset. Um, I would I would propose potentially that if it is an asset that cannot be used again, that in that scenario where it has failed, that there would be a fee associated with it because that truly is a piece of infrastructure that is being left in the ground that has no potential value whatsoever. That is not the case for, 99% of the cables of infrastructure that we put in place for these systems.
That's helpful. Cameron and then Joanne.
Yeah, I just want to re-emphasize, I think, Sarah, to your point there, I think of what we've got about 20 cables coming into Oregon right now, and the edge cable was a unique situation in which that owner did pay a punitive damage to the state because of that unique situation. But that is not the rule with HDD operations. And the second point I do want to emphasize, though, is that building on what Sarah said, this is a required or a preferred methodology as opposed to trenching across a beach for all parties. And removing an HDD bore is essentially impossible without absolute substantial environmental damage to that local area. But there are certain areas where maybe a cable can't, a bore can't be reused with a future cable. I think somewhere like in the abandoned area, because, and I see Scott Marion's here as well. There is an offshore reef there, and as things evolved, it's maybe not a preferred location now because of the depth of burial. So there are other circumstances, but I don't think. I think punishing would be a term I would use, the owner of that bore, because essentially they can't remove it, is maybe something that I would encourage DSL to reevaluate. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Cameron. And is there, a solution that you would propose so that it doesn't feel like punishment, but maybe it also takes into account what you said, those situations where bore pipes can't be reused?
Not off the top of my head, unfortunately. No, it is a difficult situation. Ideally, you do want to repurpose the bore and reuse it for future cables. That is a valid infrastructure. It's not going away. If it's maintained operationally, it can be used over and over again. But in some situations, I know maybe a marine sanctuary is developed. Those bores may not be effectively used in the future. But to hold them accountable on that is going to be difficult. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And I'd love to just hear, Jason, we'll go to you, but also would love to hear from some of the, community representatives or folks that if you have different opinions or whether you agree with what's been said, Jill, Kevin, would love to hear from you as well. Jason?
Yeah, thanks. So I reached out to folks at PacWave about their cables and their bore diameters for their pipes that go out about a mile, I think. Those are 9 inches and the cables are 3.8 inches. So I'm thinking about this 3-inch, standard above and below. You get charged extra for above. And it seems, for me, it sort of begs the question, what are the impacts of a cable that is larger than 3 inches that warrants the additional expense? For me, it sounds like it won't be affecting the data cables, but almost certainly would affect power cables that were associated with offshore wind or ocean energy. So I just want to sort of raise the question of what are the impacts of the 3.8-inch pipe or cable versus a 3-inch that would warrant the additional expense?
Sorry, go ahead, Dario.
Oh, yeah, I
Just to
think Daria will make the comment the same as I wanted. Yeah, Daria, go
just to
ahead.
clarify that like a renewable energy facility or ocean renewable energy facility is covered under a different division of rules. So it wouldn't be subject to Division 83. But I understand your point. Like, what's the difference between a 3-inch cable and a bigger cable? Is my understanding of your question.
So is there such a thing as a data cable that's bigger than 3 inches?
Natalia.
Well, that's whatever we did research, that's why we put 3 inches, because usually fiber optical cable are less than 3 inches. If maybe Sarah or someone else, if there is some new technological advance that more than 3 inches, I think no, at least what I found. But
Yeah, no, at this point in time, I mean, even when you double armor them coming into shore, which is the thickest a cable gets, it does not exceed a 3-inch diameter. What advancements could be made in the future? Do we go to triple armoring, quadruple armoring because of XYZ factors? I have no idea. That's not a direction that industry is leaning in at this point in time. So I think the 3-inch for telecom cables is a relatively comfortable metric.
yeah, what I found usually telecom cable between 1.5 to 2.5. This is like range in average, basically. So that's why we use 3 inches diameter that cover fiber optical cable.
Are there other cables that come to shore?
So I think, Jason, you're asking what infrastructure might be more than 3 inches?
Why are we talking about things
What
bigger
types
than
of
three
cables
inches, I
might
guess?
be
Yeah.
more than 3
It could
inches?
be pipelines in the future, hydrogen pipelines. So that's why we consider more. It could be power cables, but not from renewable energy facility. And we don't know what could be in the future, different type of cables as technology are developing. We try to separate that the fiber optical cables and all other infrastructure or pipelines that we may see in the future. It could be wastewater pipeline as well, and as well hydrogen pipeline.
Jason, does that help?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just it's language in the rules that sort of begs the question: why are we talking about that? If we're going to have hydrogen pipelines come to shore, I feel like that's a very different conversation. The issues, the concerns, complication, the dangers are all very different, and not sure we'd be talking about it under the context of the same sort of set of issues that is associated with a data cable. But I understand, yeah, so.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks, Jason. And I guess also, DSL, are there regular updates to this portion of the rules? Like, do you anticipate another update, for example, if something major were to change?
It's a good question. It depends on a variety of factors, but what I'm hearing is Natalia is trying to anticipate that, so that we don't have to go through rulemaking like every couple of years when new technology or new sizes, we encounter new sizes of pipelines or cables or anything like that. The rulemaking process, we have about like 4 or 5 years of rules in the works. So it would definitely be more than 5 years before we could get to these, and that's at best estimation if we had to get to them.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks, Danielle. And I was asking because I know some rules have regular updates kind of folded into the process, and I didn't know if that applied here, so wanted to clarify, folks. Okay, thanks. Yeah, Natalia, and then I would again love to hear if Jill, Kevin, or Danielle have any comments on this topic of bore pipes or the 3-inch cable diameter. Natalia?
Thanks, Sylvia. Yes, again, we try to find the solution as we had. First of all, we have updated Territorial Sea Plan Part 4, which cover all undersea infrastructure. And I mentioned during the RAC2 meeting that we did this survey in the past 2023, asking the company what should be improved, and etc. And considering Senate bill requirements, considering territorial sea plan part 4, and comments that fiber optical cables should be treated a little bit different than other type of undersea infrastructure. We tried to find the solution, and based on the survey of other states, how much they charge, what they use square foot or diameter, we proposed this solution with the 3 inches that cover fiber optical cables, and everything else, other undersea infrastructure, we use diameter if it's for pipelines or bigger cables, or we use square foot. Just for simplicity, to be aligned. In the future, as Daniela mentioned, usually rules are revised every 5 years, and we don't know what would be the next, but DLCD planning amendment and update different part of the territorial sea in the next 5 years, including part 4, 5, 1, and 2. We will see what updates would be there. If there is a case that will need revision of Division 83 in 5 years, yes, we will need to do that again. Okay. But for now, this is the solution what we found to make clear for telecom cables and other type of undersea infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the reminder of kind of all the research and background that went into kind of helping develop this formula. Jill, can I pick on you to see if you have any thoughts?
I don't really have anything to add. You know, it's a good learning experience with me. I don't really have that background in this portion of it, so it's a good discussion. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Kevin, anything from you?
No, I don't have anything on that.
All right. And Danielle?
No, I don't. I'm just taking notes here, and I'll let Eric know. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that that's been, good discussion clarity on the 3-inch diameter and the HDD bore pipes. Maybe we'll move to another topic here, which is the $3 compensation formula. So on this one, again, Natalia was noting that the proposal is that the compensation fee have kind of the $3 times linear foot. And at the last couple of meetings, there were different kinds of comments on, $3 sounds great, or it's a little too high, or this should really just be the bare minimum. So I wanted to open up that conversation again. And if the $3 does seem like it's not the right dollar amount, sort of why, what's the basis, and what might you propose other than $3? Is it helpful to see the formula again? Do people want to see that up on the screen? Okay, Danielle, maybe put that up from the compensation rates in the rules themselves.
I thought we covered that. That's why I'm asking, are you okay with the $3 and 3 inches diameter? I don't know if we need to see a formula. I would like to see the slide or both of them. How we pick up $3 per linear foot based on the survey research from other states. Because formula is simple. You multiply $3 per linear foot and per diameter and number of years for the easement. In this case, we will have 25 years instead of 20. The question with the $3 and how we choose the $3, that was chosen based on the market and see research what other states are charging per linear foot. And in that graphic, it's basically minimum.
Yes, that's helpful. I don't know if anyone can dig out that slide again, but if folks remember in your memory, there was a chart that showed how much does each state charge per linear foot, and it ranged from, I don't know, yeah, $3 was quite low. Some of them were in the 20s or something like that. Is that right, Natalia? Okay, so I'll just open up that conversation though, see if anyone has any comments on the $3 part of the formula.
I was gonna say from my side, I was fine with the $3, just exempting, just removing the HDD uplift. That was to reiterate that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other, just wait a second and then we can move on. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I already had said this, but one of my cable owners indicated that it is more than he pays in either Alaska or Washington. And I think he implied that he probably would not be renewing a cable in Oregon in the future. So, based on this.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
I I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is a one-time payment, right? You expected it up front?
Yes, it's one-time payment. As we have in our rules, you have this formula, $3 multiplied per linear foot. If it's diameter more than 3 inches, you multiply diameter and per 25 years old.
Do the other
and
states also do a lump thing at the very beginning?
again, when I mentioned during the last RAC meeting, it depends. Some state they have annual rent. Some update payment every 5 years, they revise. So in not like California, you need to pay one-time payment, but also there is annual rent. We try to find the solution and simplicity here. And that's why we use per linear foot and we don't have annual rent. It's one-time payment. You calculate it's one time for 25 years and you pay after the state land board approve the application. So that's one-time payment for 25 years. After 25 years, then if company want to renew, that's would be methodology apply for renewal, or maybe in 25 years will be something new come up based on the, I don't know, technology or amendment of the territorial sea plan part 4.
And I guess the only reason I ask is just thinking outside the box a little bit. Could the state make more money if it offered an alternative to this? They charge more per, total amount if they make the company pay on an annual basis versus the big one-time upfront payment. Same way you do if you bought something, online or something, you pay one price up front, but you pay more if you pay it out over time. I'm not sure if that's of interest or not. State might make more money off of it that way.
Yeah, we were considering like other states using CPI index every year for adjustment, which is increasing, but then you have annual rent and annual payment. But we also hear from company that they would like to have predictability and prefer to have low risk. So we try to find golden middle in this case.
Yeah. That's helpful. Okay, yeah, and I don't know if anyone from industry wants to comment on that, of having annual fees versus the one-time payment.
I mean, I would echo that a one-time payment is preferred. It is predictable. It is usually also in terms of CapEx of cost over time. A one-time cost is significantly easier to deal with and budget than an annual cost, especially something tied to a CPI or any kind of inflationary rate that is uncontrolled. So we're going to advocate strongly for one-time upfront fees because those are predictable.
Okay, thanks, Sarah and Elaine. Okay. Well, let's see, maybe let's move to the next topic in the bubble diagram that was on the slide, which is separation distance, if that's okay. So for this one, there were comments at past meetings that, in the rules, there's a required 300-meter separation distance between cables, but they do join at some point at the upland site. And, you're not always going to be able to get that 300-meter separation distance. So I think we wanted to maybe clarify what that could look like in the rules to sort of consider that flexibility for when cables are bundled, and wanted to open that up for discussion. Sarah, go ahead.
I'm gonna say, so from a technical standpoint, when it comes to the separation, so first off, when we design these systems, we design these systems to the same standards, to ICPC. And so I don't think that there is a concern from cable owners that we are going to arbitrarily and maliciously try to put cables closer together, because that is detrimental to the investment in our own asset. So personally, I am not concerned about it from that standpoint. My concern would be is if there was some sort of requirement of a 300-meter separation, basically minimum from beginning to end. What that does is that removes the ability to have multiple cables go into the same beach manhole. That increases the amount of beach manholes we would have to build, which increases the amount of things we would have to put in the ground, which I don't think is what you all want. So there are very, specific ways that we build these beach manholes, the way that as multiple cables leave the same beach manhole, that they fan out to achieve the minimum separation as quickly as we can have them achieve it. But sort of similar, harkening back to, I think one of our very first discussions that we ever had as a RAC about how it works with a cable on a sea floor, it's not a situation where we just take a straight line. We do have to we follow what is going to be the safest and most appropriate line for that cable. So it is going to snake around a little bit. But again, we are going to do everything in our power to achieve appropriate minimum distance, if not exceedingly further than that, that we possibly can.
Okay, that's helpful to hear that that's kind of the industry practice. Go ahead, Natalia.
We had a conversation with the ICPC as well. So, Sarah, what language? How should we frame the language in this case in our rules to allow that bundles?
What does the language specifically say something right now that I'm missing?
No,
Okay, so
it's
unless
not. It just unless otherwise determined
by the state land, the department will require a minimum separation of 985 3 in between cables or pipelines to allow space for detrenching and recovering of buried cables or pipelines.
How should we, because I'm not a technical expert from where,
Yeah.
and again, it's individual cases, case by cases, when they start to bundle all together. But what should be added there to bring clarity that it's allow those bundle cables when it's coming close to the shore? What your suggestion would be here? Or again, you will have opportunity, you can submit a written comment after that if you.
I was going to say, I might need to come back on that one for like a specific language suggestion, simply because I want to kind of maybe have that conversation with some of my more technical resources internally for sort of what would be the appropriate suggestion there. But I guess I see Scott's got his hand up. Maybe he or Cam, if you would have some sort of suggestion on your side, dealing with this a lot with all the beach manholes and everything.
Yeah, thanks. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just, if it were me, I was concerned when I saw this because I thought it could create a hiccup in the permitting if someone looked and said, oh, well, these are closer than 300 feet at this point. So I think either delete number 6 altogether and trust that the people that are planning these cables are following industry norms, or you could say follow the international ICPC standard for cable separation. I think that would be quite adequate and appropriate.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Cameron, I see your thumbs up.
Yeah, I just concur with Scott's approach to keeping it very industry standard in that sense, as opposed to a requirement from a state.
Yeah, you may want to reference industry best practices instead of specifically ICPC in case there is. I have no idea if there's some sort of legal issue with referencing ICPC because the state of Oregon, to my knowledge, is not a member of ICPC and all of that. So maybe industry best practices is a better phrasing of it.
That's helpful. And it sounds like, just I don't know where DSL is on including in language like industry best practices, but it still might be helpful for DSL to understand where in the sea do cables tend to start coming together. And if folks have any information on that you could provide after this meeting, it might just be helpful as DSL is considering all options for updating the rules.
That is going to be a very difficult thing to define because it is going to be very specific to the landing and the approach into that landing for what the topography of the sea floor will also allow.
Okay, so hard to find.
Yeah.
Laurel?
I was just going to say, once you get up to the actual beach manhole, it's not going to be part of DSL's jurisdiction. So the question of where they start bundling is it happening in the ocean or is it happening, under the beach? And at what point? It might not be important if you change this language, but I did wonder about referencing something external in rule. There are some issues with that sometimes. We've had guidance from DOJ that unless you refer to something that is adopted by X date, referring is a delegation issue. If it's general, that would just be a legal question. What can you reference externally that's a requirement in rule?
Okay, that's helpful. And Scott, I see your question in the chat on, is the separation standard intended to protect the interests of the first cable owner? I don't know if DSL has thoughts on that question.
So here is, first of all, it's critical infrastructure and everyone responsible for critical infrastructure, including state agency. And there is a requirements for that. And minimum is required, as we have here, to, if there is something happen, you need to repair and bury cables. This is the number one. And number two, as I mentioned before, ocean become more and more populated with all different type of infrastructure. And we do need to think about how should we minimize any also environmental impact if some situation can happen. But again, this is just ICPC minimum requirements and basically industry standards for that. In the future, I hope the state will do cable assessment study, whatever corridor or separation standards we need that specifically cover Oregon local conditions. That might be some new language will appear there. But for now, this is what it is. Or to protect critical infrastructure again, and this is in part 4, saying that DSL may establish separation standards. And when we start to research and talk with different stakeholders and ICPC and their guidelines that they provide, this is what minimum we want to put there.
That's helpful. Well, oh, Laurel, do you still have another comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say the language at the beginning of that allows the land board, and the land board approves these specifically, right? They are the ones that are approving the easements, allows them to deviate from that if it's necessary. So I don't know if that helps at all.
Right, the unless otherwise determined by the state land board language. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think this has been a good conversation. Natalia and team, is this enough for you to kind of consider how or whether to make changes here, or any other specific questions for the RAC?
Yeah, I think with this question, yeah, I think that's enough. Regarding reference to external, yes, and we will talk again with DOJ about that. As Lauren already mentioned, the preference that we do put something like more clear with the clarity there, some standards, and not just reference to external resources unless it's approved inside the state. That's why we have this language, and that's why we try to find the right framing for that. But we will consult with DOJ again. Yes, but for now, I think this is enough. The only things I want to hear about types of financial assurance, the last bubble.
Okay,
and
perfect.
then I think we can come back to the bore pipe. Scott Marian has a question as well. That will be clarified because we will
Yes.
discuss this later on separately with the ODFW.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so let's then go to the financial assurance piece. And maybe Danielle, if you want to put that up on the screen, the rule language, but there's a requirement for financial assurance in 0857. And Sarah, you suggested kind of specifying and expanding the list of acceptable
Yeah.
instruments.
So
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
want to start off by saying, by no means are we objecting to a requirement of financial assurance. That is not what this is about. This was simply a request to be able to expand the list of acceptable financial insurance items because there are other forms of it out there that are actually lower cost to the applicant than what some of the standards that Oregon has used, which we have complied with in the past. I've done the financial insurances using things like surety bonds and all of that. But our request was if we can expand the list, that just provides more opportunities. So things like, because the current rules limit acceptable financial assurances to surety bonds, cash deposits, or certificates of deposit, which are the most expensive forms of financial assurances that you can get. So letters of credit, parental company guarantees, insurance-backed instruments also could satisfy this and provide the same level of assurances, which are very standard in infrastructure and in subsea cable transactions. So that was what our suggestion was stemming from.
And I see a thumbs up from Joanne. That's helpful. And Elaine and Cameron's shaking his head too. Yeah, Elaine, go ahead.
I was saying letters of credit are a must. That's accepted by other state agencies for other critical infrastructure.
Would anyone on the RAC have concerns about allowing additional types of financial assurance? Scott McMullen, go ahead.
Yeah, I think these are industry standard, and I don't have any concerns whatsoever. I think it's typical.
And Natalia, did you have any other kind of follow-up questions that you wanted to ask on this?
No, I'm not a financial expert. So with this regard, I really want to hear those perspectives, but we will consult with DOJ and also Department of Administrative Services because they help us to decide form of financial assurance. Yes, so that we will have a consultation. That's why proposal, what specific type is really useful. We will bring them to them and see if it's like state practice and etc. and what could be allowed. Thank you.
I have a question for the RAC. We recently worked on our waterway leases, licenses, and registrations rules, in which we did introduce a new rule for financial assurances. Would y'all like to see that language? It goes into effect next year to get an idea of, and Natalia too, also, if you would like to see that language to get an idea of like, maybe is this something that would be sufficient? So it's like language that's already gone through a RAC and a public comment period, state land board approval. Just, and it might be helpful. I don't know if anybody wants to see that.
I think we already considered that.
Okay.
That's why we try to align what is in there.
Okay, well, I just wanted it kind of goes along with what you were saying about talking with DAS risk management.
Danielle,
Oh,
this is Dana. I
yeah.
would love to see it just because I'm always interested in consistency across, within the same program and the rules. So at least if it might address some of the concerns. And sorry to speak up right when I rejoined, but because I
Yeah,
haven't heard
that's
the whole conversation, but that would be my interest just to
yeah,
keep
the
each bit
whole
aligned.
conversation, Dana, to propose different type of financial assurance, additional to what we require, like letter of credit, and we don't have, and I don't think Division 82 has a letter of credit as in that list.
Well, it
Um,
doesn't say it specifically. It has this language, which seemed to align a little bit, Natalia, with what you were saying just now, like just before this, before I
uh,
interrupted.
we we
Well,
have this
so
language
just to
as
pause
well.
for a
We have
second,
this
let's just
language
check
as
with the,
well.
can we just check with
Yeah.
the RAC and see? So this is language that exists elsewhere in other rules, so it sounds like might be easier to, keep consistency like Dana said. So would something like you highlighted clause 2 here or
Yeah,
rule number 2,
section 2, yeah.
would that meet industry interests? Elaine, go
It,
ahead.
No, I don't think that language is adequate, but what could happen is this could be part of an enumeration of what is permissible. So you could have all the different forms that are in rule, letter of credit, bond, parent guarantee, whatever the list is going to be, and then say, and any other type of financial assurance determined appropriate and blah, 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 blah. So it could be a catch-all. So you could have that flexibility built in case there's something else that comes around on the market.
Yeah, Natalia?
um, yeah, I looked at that language when we draft this draft because it should be aligned with all others, and we look at all other different divisions, what financial assurance type there. And this language that we will consult with, we have it in our current division, updated our proposal, Division 83. We have that department shall consult to determine financial assurance with DOJ and Department of Administrative Services. So that's language was taken from there as well to be aligned. But yes, I see that the concern here to have a clear type of financial assurance. That's why I wanted to hear what type and why, and then we can bring it to DOJ and DAS to consult about this and the state practice. Yes, and I remember letter of credits that we don't have mentioned it anywhere in our other rules as well. So this would be new if we listed alternative of type of financial assurance.
Okay.
So that's why I want to hear as much as possible what it could be there. Because again, other waterways could be a little bit different than the territorial sea. Well, not could be, but it is different than the territorial sea.
Okay, thanks, Natalia. All right, so we heard kind of the list of financial assurances that would be more acceptable, lower cost to industry. Any other comments from folks on this topic? Right. Okay, then let's keep moving. We want to just open it up to any other comments you have on any portion of the rules, especially anything that you think you haven't had a chance to say in previous RAC meetings. And I'll start the conversation while people are thinking about what they might want to provide. Scott, you wanted to go back to the HCD bore pipe. So do you want to touch on that?
Sure. I'm not sure if anybody here knows the answer about the question of the end of the pipe. As we were discussing, this thing that we agree, we need to, must, and want to leave the bore pipe under the beach and not extract it. I'm wondering about the terminal end at the ocean. If basically, I'm not really aware of how deeply that is typically buried at the emergence point where the cable comes out. Should we expect that shifting seafloor over decades following cable decommissioning to actually emerge from the seafloor? Are we really talking about something that will be in its entirety buried under the sand in perpetuity, or are we looking at the potential for that pipe sticking up in the ocean?
So I
in the future?
can help answer that to a certain extent. So at the basically the pipe is, a kind of a big U shape ish that goes under because we go super deep and then we come back up to the sea floor. So like the Bifrost HD, for example, I think at its deepest point is like buried 80 feet deep or something like that. And so when it comes back up, it when we initially bury it, or we initially install it, it's at the surface. Actually, it's a couple feet below because we wind up further trenching and burying to that point. And then once the cable is installed, we bury over the top of it to cover everything back up so that the entrance to the bore pipe itself remains buried. And then as part of current land or territorial sea easement requirements, the cable owner has the obligation to go out, I believe it's every 5 years, and confirm that the cable, that the entry point to the HDD remains buried, and if not, to make sure that it stays covered. So the intent is that it would remain buried. It certainly has the potential to become uncovered if there is, the movement of the sediment and the movement of the sand. But the HDD itself should remain entirely buried for as long as it's there.
So just if I understand you, at the time of installation, the end of the pipe is, you said, a matter of a foot or something below the sand surface?
I mean, it's right there at the surface. I
Yeah.
mean, and then it winds up getting covered up. And then when you do the installation, you have to come back, you have to uncover it, do the installation, cover it back up. So it's very minimal surface expression, if at all.
And Scott, do you have a concern or a proposal based on that? Or just kind of
Well,
wanting to
I
understand
just
more?
wanted clarity on, we've been talking about that point about the essentially an encroachment easement for the bore pipe, as if the entire thing will never be seen again. And I guess I'm not convinced of that point, in the sense that, feet of sand elevation change in the ocean and the near shore happens all the time. And any attempt to mound sand over a point like that, would not be permanent. So I just want to make sure we're basing our decisions on the actual physical reality on the ground, which I think we need to contemplate the idea that there would be an obstacle sticking out of the sand in the future after that decommissioning of the cable. What we want to do with that is, a separate decision. I just want to make sure we're accurately reflecting what actually happens out there.
Okay, that's helpful. Scott McMullen?
Yeah, I do have a little bit of experience, Scott. First cable project I worked on I was on a cable ship that was landing a cable at the AT&T cable landing station in Bandon. And what the original bore pipes, 4 borers were done in the early 90s. In the late 90s, 2 more cables were going to be added to the 2 empty conduits. The sand had so covered those bores that it took days and days to get them exposed enough to install the cable. So the cable, as you correctly point out, the sand waves move in and move out, and that varies during the time of the year even. But the pipe itself won't move because it's anchored so far down. When as Sarah said, it goes 60, 80 feet below the surf when it comes out. But all of our experience, Scott, has been that these cable bore pipe exits do not come to the surface. We've had a couple of surveys of those after the fact, and there's never been any indication. We put a precautionary zone around them so that fishermen are aware that that's where something is, but we've never had any problem. And my understanding with a new project that I heard about recently for Washington was that that the plan was to actually, at the time of installation, they would cut the pipe off just a little bit below the seabed at the time, and then by the time the installation was done, it would be back to whatever the level of the sand is at that time. So buried. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Kevin?
Yeah, I've got a kind of a random question. When you guys are doing these bores into the ocean, what kind of bore mud are they using? I've only dealt with stuff.
It's a little hard to hear that. You said when they're doing the bores, what do they use?
What kind of bore mud are they using?
Bore motor?
Mud.
No, mud.
Mud.
You mean
Yeah.
you mean the
The
drilling fluid,
drilling
the mud.
fluid.
Correct. Yeah.
It's essentially water and bentonite and silica.
So the same as they use on when they're not under the sea.
Yes.
Okay. I was just wondering that.
All right, thanks, Kevin. All right. Okay, so then I'll just open it up if folks have any additional comments on anything else in the RAC, any of the different sections, whether it's the definitions, the review process for different applications, terms and conditions. We've talked about compensation rates quite a bit, but if you have anything else there, anything on decommissioning and recovery or encroachment easements, financial assurance, as we talked about, but the floor is open for any additional comments. Elaine?
Thanks. I think it's a little bit hard to say any additional comments on prior comments that were made until we see revised language to understand how staff may or may not be incorporating those comments into the draft rules. So I don't want to, reiterate things that were already commented on in the earlier meetings regarding like the application content requirements aligning with the standards or the review criteria, but I think that's pretty important. And I hope we get a chance to see that before that goes out for public comment.
Yeah, and on that piece, maybe DSL, can you speak to the possibility of being able to have updated rules, especially on kind of the application review criteria and process and those clarifying edits before a June RAC meeting? I know there's a lot of internal and processes with other state agencies, so I just kind of no promises here, but just checking if that's like a possibility to be able to respond to what Elaine is asking for.
Sorry, I'm looking at a calendar up here on my wall. So the meeting's June 5th. We get materials out to you a week before. And I would want to make sure those are finalized, and also due to my schedule, they would have to go out May 27th. So that gives us a good solid 12 business days to make these edits. So I know that Natalia will probably get to as much as she can. But there's no guarantee that we can make all of the edits and revisions and have everything resolved in 2 weeks. But I know that Natalia is already planning on working on some of this.
Okay.
So I can't guarantee everything, but I'm going to hope that we do have some things that come back to you.
Remind me, are we on a a legislative directed timeline to finish up these rules by a
Yes.
certain time? So
Yes.
and remind me what that is.
Okay, excellent question. So these rules need to go into effect January 1st, 2027. They also have to be approved by the state land board. And we are planning on bringing these to the October land board meeting, and having a public comment period in July. And while those seem like quite a few months apart, I want to stick with July because then that gives us time to address any public comments before we need to work on the agenda item for the land board, because the land board agenda item process is about 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to have all of our comment periods closed and resolved before we start drafting our land board item.
Okay, that's helpful. I think, some of your public comments might be resolved if we saw a red line in the RAC
I
before
totally
you publish.
understand.
So
I totally
there's a
understand.
little catch-22 there on that. So
Yeah, it's we're gonna try to do the best that we can, but we definitely want to get all of this stuff incorporated by the end of June, before the end of June.
Well,
yeah.
and maybe one way to deal with it is there seems to be quite a bit of consensus on some of the issues that we went through, on the slide today for what you were looking for feedback on. And so to the extent that you can circulate to the RAC ahead of the last RAC meeting in June, red line on where there was still outstanding questions of how staff was planning to address comments, and leave the rest of the red line for later, right? Like you can kind of phase it. That can be helpful too. So
Okay.
Thanks for the consideration.
Yeah, no, and thank you for your questions.
Great, thanks, Elaine. Scott McMullen.
Yeah, thank you. With the governor's prosperity plan, one of the items that she had, or that has come out, and was quicker permitting and reduced simpler permitting process. It wasn't specific to this, but it just in general, she's saying that that's a direction the state wants to go in order to retain existing businesses and attract new businesses. And we have an opportunity here that I would like to just remind us all is what seems to be missing, and I think could be very, very helpful for the state of Oregon, is a time limit on how quickly a permit application can be processed. Maybe it's 6 months. I'm not here to tell you what that time limit is, but if it's just open-ended and the state can go back to ask for more and more information, ask for more experts to come and analyze the information that's being asked, it can drag out for quite a while. And there's certainly a fear amongst cable owners that this is the new process. We have a more, I think the term that's been used is a more robust cable application process. Okay, that's been adopted. And now we're about to adopt more increased fees. Okay, so the whole point of this is to gain revenue for the state. And if nobody comes to the state of Oregon, all this work that we're doing now is for nothing. So my just heartfelt request would be look very sincerely at having a time limit and how quickly a permit can be processed, and like 6 months, say, so that there's something to sort of give back to the cable industry in exchange for increased fees and a more complex, robust application process. So if we want to attract cables here, we should try to do something that will give back to the cable industry in exchange for all of the additional requirements. So thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate that, and see the thumbs up from Joanne, Elaine, and Sarah as well.
And I just want to follow up with that. Thanks, Scott. Yes, exchange. We already agreed 25 years instead of 20. So regarding timelines, you mentioned 6 months, and we had a discussion again with the timeline with DOJ and etc. And looking at other states, they don't have even specific dates, number of days, how they issue the easy months or whatever, how they call permits or right away or something else in their rules. And that's why we have in our rules that application should be submitted at least 6 months before 180 days. So this is what we can have here, assuming that we do as much as possible to issue the easements during that 6 months. But again, consider that this is case-by-case project, and this is covering all undersea infrastructure. In some cases, telecommunication cables, yeah, this is very easy, and we may issue in 6 months. But if it's something else, a more difficult or more sensitive area, and require some additional study, and we have joint agency review team as well, and state land board meeting, it could be taking somehow longer, depend on the project. That's my response, that we should consider all different scenarios, and this is again not just telecommunication cables as it was before. And we put 180 days, 6 months, trying to do our best to issue the easements during that timeline. But again, there is an external factor, as you mentioned, when we say submit this report or provide information during 120 days. The cable company mentioned we cannot arrange vessels during that time. The same from our perspective, from our side, we also have some external factors that we cannot control. And we want to give that time as well in our rules. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Natalia. Scott, and then Cameron, and then maybe we'll take a quick break here. So go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I was just going to tell Natalia that I will be happy to send a letter of introduction or email of introduction to your counterpart in Australia who gave a presentation at the ICPC meeting in Athens a couple weeks ago. And while I know Oregon has now joined the ICPC, which I think is great, I wish you could have been there because in Australia, they have a process where they get cables processed in 2 months. And so I'd be happy to put you two together and maybe you can learn from what their experience has been. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah,
Cameron?
thank you, Scott.
Yeah, as a Kiwi, Scott, I'd say beware of the Aussies. But that said, in defense of Natalia or the DSL process, I think, Dario and I worked on several projects together. It is, in comparison to its counterparts in Washington and California in particular, it is an effective process. But I do want to throw in the fact that it's not just DSL. There's Oregon Parks and Recreation. There's the counties. There's the Army Corps. There are other agencies that play into that timeline that we have to consider. So it's not just a DSL owned process. Thank you, Sylvia.
Thanks, Cameron. All right. Well, with that, let's take a break. And when we come back, we will look at the proposed rulemaking, the notice components, the racial equity statement, and the fiscal impact statement. So maybe let's get back together at 11:10 and we'll get to that topic.
Okay, we're recording again.
Okay, thanks, Danielle. So the question is, and if we need to answer this offline because Greg is a little bit slower than the rest of the group, that's fine. But in 0852 and 853 specifically, when we talk about decommissioning, removal of infrastructure, in 0853, it talks 3 different times about denial of an application. And the third time they talk about the applicant can pull their application and then 30 days before the agency can deny it as well. My question there is then that we're talking about the removal of equipment. Someone's easement application is either pulled or denied. It doesn't talk about then what happens. Do you revert back to 0852 and reconsider your decommissioning? Just kind of what the next step is there if infrastructure that was deemed too environmentally sensitive to take out, if that permanent easement isn't granted, what then? And again, if someone needs to talk about this offline, I'm happy to do that too.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I don't know, Natalia or Dario, if you have a response.
Natalia, do you want to go first or?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. This is what I mentioned in my first slide, what we will consider for now. Yes, there is a bunch of comments that what should happen next? It should be clarity there. This is what we will review and try to make that clarity and close that loop. But the specific comments, particular written one, would be really useful for me, particular if it looks like we will need to have RAC 5 meeting on June 5th. And we want to have a draft text. I cannot promise anything because it doesn't depend just on me, require a lot of consultation. If it's June 5th, we need to send on May 29th or already draft text. I would like to have a written comments from all RAC member as soon as possible that will allow me to draft, change text and follow up with internally another agency to consult with them, particularly with DOJ. So if you have that specific proposal, it would be really useful for me also to save time and not thinking how I can connect dot from everything. Yeah, please submit it. And I don't know, Sylvia will probably give a deadline for the comments, but if we want to see draft text updated before June 5th, I'm welcoming all these written comments that can help me to speed up.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Natalia. For sure, written comments, I would think within a week, probably, in order to give DSL time to review them, or maybe even sooner.
Yes,
the documents
if it's
go out 2
possible, I
weeks
would
after
like to
that.
have sooner because, as Daniela mentioned, have only 12 business day, and I need to draft and I need to send to consult with other agency.
Yeah. But I also think, just following up on Greg's question, I think his question was just trying to understand what happens if someone's encroachment easement application is denied. Sounds like maybe that's a comment too, but you just wanted to understand
Yeah,
here.
and I apologize for dragging us back into the rulemaking comments. I just wasn't able to make the last meeting to ask this question. But yeah, it's not necessarily new language. I mean, if I need to help with new language on the what next, I'm happy to do that. But it really is for me just to clarify, what happens if that encroachment is denied.
And Dario?
Yeah, I was just going to say I mean, my idea of the flow of this process would be, you have a use where it's being decommissioned, then, part of it might not be able to be removed from the state lands for whatever reason. And, it said, hey, it's better to leave this XYZ in C2. And then that's kind of the purpose of the encroachment easement is, okay, well, we can leave it there and you can obtain this authorization that just says you now don't have to deal with it again. Right. So yeah, what happens if it's denied? Because you would have to consider, the positive track and the negative track. But I mean, that kind of is the purpose of those types of easements. So I'm not sure in what situations they would be denied exactly, but I'd imagine they'd be, saying, okay, let's go back to, could this be removed or otherwise authorized, right? But that's just my first guess.
Yeah, so there's A through I on reasons the agency would not be the application would not be approved. So I'm not smart enough to put that into numbers, but there's a whole list there, and so I'm really just curious, if the state exercises their option to say we're not going to grant this easement for, section 15 sub D, doesn't conform to the provisions of the rules and the territorial sea plan. That puts them in a place where they've applied to and tried to get that permanent easement. The state has said no, i.e., you need to take it out. But it seems like there's kind of a impasse there on what to do next.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. And you don't need to apologize because it's back and forth. We're discussing the text, and you're welcome, and other members, please.
Oh, it's just
You're
everybody on
welcome,
this.
but yes, but it would be really helpful written comments because we have
Yeah.
tight deadlines and not just doing Division 83, all other stuff. And it would be helpful for me to draft a text in very short period of time.
Will do. And for me, it's probably just a misunderstanding that this group is so far more intelligent than I am on these issues that I'm just kind of playing catch up. So I'll work on some comments, some written comments, and maybe reach out to a couple of you folks for maybe some further understanding.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Greg. All right, so let's move into the notice components. I'll hand it over to Danielle to share screen. And in advance of this meeting, you should have gotten the draft fiscal impact statement as well as a worksheet with some questions to develop a racial impact statement. And Danielle will kind of go over what these documents are and what these documents are, and we can kind of get your input on the fiscal impact statement and then also kind of responses to questions in the racial impact statement. So Danielle, over to you.
Okay. Thank you. So you'll see we did make a few clarifications between when we sent this out and when I'm showing it to you now. The fiscal impact statement and cost of compliance, I just referred to the whole thing as the fiscal impact statement, is required by law to be included in the notice of proposed rulemaking. And in that we have certain things that we have to identify, such as like who's going to be affected and how they're going to be affected. And then of course impact to small businesses. So it's not a very complicated thing. We know there's going to be an economic impact to businesses and or easement holders or encroachment holders. Is there anything in here in this first fiscal and economic impact section that we missed? And it's okay if there's nothing because it's a very small population that's impacted by these rules. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so you just want to see, is there anyone kind of missing from the list of folks that could be impacted by these rules? Maybe we'll start there. All right, let's see. Yeah, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, is the state's definition of a small business 100 employees or less? What's the threshold for
Yeah.
small business?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. So, okay, not hearing anything on these first two paragraphs. And the cost of compliance, this first one is, it always, because we deal mostly like with government or governments are going to be affected and there are members of the public. It's pretty much a reiteration of that first paragraph. And so if there's nothing to add in that first bit, I don't think we have anything to add here. As far as the effect on small businesses, as Scott has asked, about the size, 100 folks or less. And since I don't know that businesses with 100 people or less are going to be landing cables or placing cables in the territorial sea, we don't expect there to be an impact on small businesses. And then no additional record keeping because we're staying within the realm of what's been done already. We're just changing the fees. There are some things that we're changing, but they're not things that aren't being done already. And this last one, C, is basically additional in addition to what you already do to comply with the rules. Any thoughts on this part of it?
And maybe we can go in order again, kind of for small businesses. Does anyone see that the rules could have impacts on small businesses? Scott McMullen?
Well, I'm aware of a project in Washington that I believe is a fairly small number of individuals involved. I think it's a subdivision maybe of a larger company, so I don't know how that plays into the rules, but the actual part that's building the cable landing station in Washington is just a matter of a few people that are well organized and highly skilled. So it could certainly potentially be that way here, where somebody could build a cable landing station, not be not be a over the top person, but just a company, but an individual or a group of individual businessmen that want to make a landing station to host other cables. So it could.
I don't know that the landing station would be under our jurisdiction. I'm not familiar enough to know where exactly they are, but if it's on the uplands, that's going to be Parks and Rec.
Yeah, I understand that, Danielle, but what I meant was associated with the landing station would be a number of bore pipes that would be for landing cables. In the model that's being planned off Washington, they have one cable landing station on shore, not under, the marine jurisdiction, but I think up to 6 bore pipes that are going to come out from that station.
Okay, thank you. I will look into subdivisions of larger companies to see if those count. And if so, then we'll work that in.
Thanks. Anything else on small businesses? All right, and then maybe on B and C for like, are you seeing any additional expected reporting or record keeping or professional services from these rules that maybe should be listed here? All right. Not seeing any hands. All right. I think that's it on this fiscal impact statement. And it's okay if not a lot of comments. There typically are not a lot of comments on these at the rulemaking advisory committees, but if there's anything, of course, want to provide the opportunity.
Okay. And the next one is the racial equity statement. I provided a PDF of like things to think about and so that we could talk about it. And then we'll draft it based on what we talk about. This is required by law. Every agency has to do this. It's the intent of this is for agencies like Department of Corrections, Health, or OHCS, Housing Community Services, Health Authority, things like that. But all agencies are required to look at whether or not these rules are going to have some sort of impact on racial equity in the state. And that could be positive impact, negative impact, or a lot of times in DSL's case, it's no impact. But sorry, let me turn off the formatting marks. I know that not everybody likes those. And so we want to get your perspective on, is this going to have a negative impact on any one racial group? Is it going to have a positive impact or no impact, positive or negative? So things like what persons and groups are subject to the rule. It's pretty straightforward. It's businesses or persons. We define a person as a business too, who are going to be putting infrastructure in the territorial sea, affixed to the sea floor, buried below it. So we've kind of identified that in just all of our talking. Issues addressed by the rule are how to apply for these, how much it's going to cost. That's obviously the big one. And just the governance of having undersea infrastructure. And so that's things that are all known and we know. One thing that the next one, which racial groups are likely to be most concerned and affected by the issues addressed in the rule? Are there any that you all know of? And if you don't know or you don't think there are, that is totally fine. There doesn't have to be a yes, this group.
Yeah, and as folks are thinking about that, I also just wanted to relay from Lene Rutledge, who's on this RAC. She sent an email just to respectfully decline to offer any input on the racial equity statement. So I just wanted to put that on the record, just noting that it's a complex topic, and just was not raised earlier. So I just wanted to relay that comment from Lene as well. But others, if you have comments or thoughts here, would welcome those.
And not really hearing anything for bullet 3. Bullet 4 is kind of moot. And then is there something for bullet 5? Would there be any data that we could supply or whatnot that would help determine if there are any racial equity impacts? Or if you know of any data? Not hearing anything. Think we're gonna skip past this next section. And this is our model statement. So like I will be drafting something that's pretty similar that answers these questions and this is what we put forward. These are standard determinations or like what we would consider standard determinations. What we will probably go with in this situation, given that we don't know of any racial groups that will be impacted, is this first bullet. The rule is unlikely to impact racial equity in Oregon. Is there anybody who disagrees with that? Okay. Going once, going twice. All right. And that wraps up. Thank y'all for that, for your considerations. That wraps up that part of what I'm going to talk about.
Perfect. Thanks, Danielle. All right. And I think as with the written comments on the rules, if something occurs to folks on the fiscal impact statement or the racial equity statement, I think you could still provide written thoughts. Is that right, Danielle? Maybe by
Yes. If you have anything that occurs to you in the next few days, feel free to email Sylvia and she will relay that to us. Yeah. And that's
okay. All right. Well, let's move into interested party comments. And I think that we mostly don't have a lot of folks from the public joining us today. So I just want to see if any interested parties are interested in making a comment today. Can you please go ahead and raise your hand just so we know? All right. I do not see anyone, so we will skip interested party comments, but appreciate the public always for attending. So I think maybe we have some overall next steps here, but maybe before we go into these, we should just kind of clarify the process between now and June. And so maybe first, let's just do show of hands. Like how many people would want to have another RAC meeting to see what changes. And again, DSL has to work with a lot of other agencies. So the red lines that you are able to receive before the June meeting, can't promise anything. I heard you loud and clear, DSL. But with that in mind, would folks want to have the fifth RAC meeting on June 5th? Is it? Yeah. Maybe show of hands. Elaine, Scott, see Cameron, Jason, Joanne, okay, Greg. All right. Sarah, yeah. All right, seeing a lot of support for that. So probably assume we will have that meeting. Yes, DSL, unless
Oh,
anything
yes.
Okay.
I think based on the amount of RAC members who've shown a preference to having it, that we will be having that meeting on June 5th.
Perfect. And Natalia and Dario, what would be an appropriate deadline for written comments? Any additional written comments on the rules in order to give you enough time to, mull those over?
You mean from the RAC members?
From RAC members, yeah.
I would like to have by the end of this week.
Okay.
And yeah, Dario, he will be out, so he will not attend in the RAC 5th meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, we've gotten a lot of great written comments from folks. So maybe if you have anything else to add, of course, if you've already submitted comments, you don't need to resubmit them. They're being considered, but May 8th for anything else. And sorry, Dario, I cut you off there.
Well, I was just saying, I know, Sylvia, that you had said, we're not promising anything, right? So between the two spectrums of there's a whole bunch of redlined text and no redlined text, if we're looking at the spectrum of there's nothing, what is there an interest? Is that like, what would we be doing at that fifth meeting at that point? That's my question, I guess. I'm just curious, sorry.
Is that a question for me?
I think so.
I will have trouble answering that one. But I think that's a good question. Like if DSL is not able to produce a red line document because you need to coordinate more with agencies or do more internal review, is it still worth having that June RAC meeting?
I think so. I think it'd be helpful to hear where DSL is at and all of that of addressing those comments that are still outstanding and coordinating with agencies.
And Dana, I saw you come on camera. Did you have something you wanted to say?
I was just going to say I appreciated the proposal that was brought earlier, and I cannot remember who said that, but there seemed to be an understanding that some of the comments we can reflect in some proposed rule language and share that. And there may just be a handful of others that it is more of a status update of kind of what conversations we've had, but it may not be final rule language shared yet. But that seemed like a good middle ground that we could meet.
Okay, thanks, Dana. All right. Any other comments, thoughts on submitting written comments or having this June RAC meeting? All right, then I will hand it back over to Danielle to go through next steps.
Okay, so these next steps were written in hopes that, we wouldn't have our tentative meeting. But so you'll see these again. But we will be sending to go over things that aren't on here now. We will be having that June 5th meeting, as we've all decided. Materials should be coming to you May 27th. And I say May 27th because I am out of state on the 28th and 29th. So I will not be able to post things to the web. And yeah, so we'll get materials out to you for May 27th. So, and just looking ahead, we kind of talked about a little bit of this before our public comment period, which I had for some reason July 2nd on there, and then I took it down and just fixed it. It's July 1st through July 31st. And we're going to have 4 public rule hearings. We're going to have 1 virtual and 3 in person along the coast. Oh, I did not look at this. We're going to be in Astoria, Newport, and Coos Bay. And those will be the 3rd week of July. So the week of July 20th, we'll have public rule hearings. And then during that public comment period, July 1st through July 31st, we will be taking written comments, and there will be 3 ways to submit those comments. And again, as Natalia mentioned this earlier, sharing the notice of the public comment period with whomever, you know, in your industry or whomever would be affected by this would be wonderful. RAC members, and I'll go over this again the next meeting, RAC members will be getting emails specifically saying, hey, the public comment period's open. Here's the notice of proposed rulemaking. Here's anything else that we put out along with it. And then you can just forward that email out to whomever you think would benefit from seeing the proposed rules and providing comment. And as always, we will send a meeting summary to you within the week. And today's meeting will be posted to the web, and all meeting materials are posted to our website. The only thing we haven't been posting are the email comments that are kind of comments amongst yourselves. But we have saved those so they're part of the public record. Any questions about what's coming up next? Oh, I did miss bullet point 2, which I had talked about earlier, is we're anticipating going to the State Land Board in October 2026. And part of why we're going in October and not at the December meeting is there was legislation that was just passed in the short session that named DSL and I think 3 or 4 other natural resource agencies that our rules cannot be effective until at least 28 days after they're filed with the Secretary of State. And that it begins with rules that are effective January 1, 2027 onward. So I have to have these filed as permanent rules in the beginning of December. But we originally were going to be going in October anyway, because we like to give at least 2 months notice to the public about the changes that are coming so that they're not filed and it's surprise, this is effective today. Any questions about what's coming next? And sorry if you hear my dog wrinkling paper and chewing an envelope. He's entertaining himself and not barking.
We don't hear anything, Danielle, but it sounds very
okay,
cute.
Good.
All right. Well, I think that concludes everything. Any final thoughts from anyone before we close today? All right. Well, thank you everyone for participating, and reminder to send anything else in writing by this Friday. And we will see you again in June.
Thanks.
Thank
you. Bye.